What are the coolest dinosaurs? Just come in and create these stories. Leave Pokemon.
It's impossible.
Let's talk about decisions. Decisions are these interesting and complex things that we, as creatures of independent thought, are able to use to change the course of fate and destiny, to pull it to our side and affect the future of what may or may not happen to us. But what is the most important decision that a person can make? Some might say it's choosing whether or not to say I do or I don't up at that very important place at the altar. Others will say it's choosing what college they want to go to and thus decide what their future vocational study is going to be and what life will look like for them all the way up into retirement. But I think we're all well aware that the biggest decision a person could make was one that many of us made back in September of 1998, when Pokemon Red and Blue was first revealed here in the United States. You see, back in those days, you had to choose between one of 3 starters, and that setup has retained pretty much the same throughout the rest of the generations. You got to choose between Bulbasaur, Squirtle, or Charmander, also known as easy, medium, or hard. The reason I bring it up in that way is because if we look at the context of how the gyms are laid out in that generation, coming up with Bulbasaur means that you're not going to really face a difficult challenge with your starter, typing that they are incredibly weak against, until the 7th out of 8 gyms. Squirtle is very similar, with you having to wait until you get to the electric gym to have that instance. But Charmander, the very first gym being a rock type puts you at a strict disadvantage, and the second gym being a water type puts you even further down that rabbit hole. But in time since then, Pokemon has introduced a number of gimmicks and abilities that allow for the game to change, allow us to understand how a battle is meant to take place in new and restructured forms. For example, let's look back at Pokemon Gold and Silver with held items. When this game was introduced, the object of being able to hold an item or have a Pokemon hold an item changed the way that changed the way that movement out of battle and how the outcome of battles were affected. For example, a Pokemon could be holding a berry that would heal a status condition as soon as they get it, or something like an amulet coin, which would double a player's earnings with every battle. We move on from there into Ruby and Sapphire, where double battles were introduced. This allowed you to put 2 different Pokemon on the field at the same time, and in several instances within the game itself, allow you and another trainer to function together as a team against a mutual enemy. In Diamond and Pearl, we had our first instance of online play, with this generation being the first to be housed in the Nintendo DS, and the Wi-Fi capabilities allowed for better trading as well as online battles. Pokemon Black and White brought in triple battles and rotational battles, which further deepened the complexity of battles, and is something that honestly, we don't really see enough of anymore, with rotational battles being pretty much extinct and triple battles being rare, if ever seen. But it's not until we get into Generation 6 that the entire dynamic shifts, where Pokemon are now changed by different default values, statistics, and held items to be able to change not just in battle, but appearance as well. This is the first generation where we first saw Mega Evolution, which has become since a staple of the Pokemon game, being reintroduced in the upcoming Pokemon Legends ZA. Mega Evolution pretty much brought in these extra forms for Pokemon, ones that allowed us to re-fall in love with Pokemon designs that we loved before, or give new examples to Pokemon that we didn't care about previously. In Pokemon Sun and Moon, Z-moves replaced Mega Evolution. We still had some Mega Evolution, but Z-moves really took the spotlight as the gimmick of that generation, and while they're cool and interesting, we really missed that change of form. Luckily, Pokemon Sword and Shield brought in Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing, where some Pokemon were able to grow in stature, others were not just able to grow, but able to show, change in design and elements so that they could appear in more extravagant forms. It really felt like we were getting back to the Mega Evolution type of energy while having a different gimmick altogether. It was really cool and something that I really look forward to hopefully seeing again someday. And then we get into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet with Terastallization. A little bit of a bummer because we've gotten so used to seeing Pokemon with new forms, whether that be Mega forms or Gigantamaxing. Suddenly, our biggest gimmick that we have for the new region is Pokemon in Hat. And while Gigantamax and Mega forms allowed Pokemon to get these new and exciting new forms, there were some who chose to steal greedily from that bucket of wealth. I'm talking about Charizard. Hey, do you love Blastoise? Do you love Venusaur? Well, guess what? They both get new Mega Evolutions that make them super cool. But what about Charizard, I hear you ask? Well, I have some bad news. Charizard doesn't get a Mega form. Charizard gets 2 Mega forms! Why? Suddenly that whole equality of being able to choose between one of 3 Pokemon at the start of Generation 1 way back in 1998 seems really trivial, as the equality space between the 3 has become so much more divided. Charizard has gotten the newest and greatest thing in Mega Evolution, which is 2 Mega Forms. And while I can say a dozen times over that Charizard has greedily stolen from these pools, taking almost every gimmick and new form under the sun, there are a few that it didn't get. For example, in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, Charizard didn't get a past or future paradox. We left that up to some other Pokemon who desperately needed a little bit more love and attention. So you'd have to be crazy to give Charizard every other gimmick that it didn't get in these previous games, right? You'd have to be crazy.
I was crazy once. They locked me in a room. A rubber room. A rubber room with rats. And rats make me crazy.
But that's what we're doing today, taking Charizard and throwing more gimmicks onto it so that it can finally become the greedy god of wealth and popularity within the franchise that it was always meant to be. So without much further ado, let's hop into today's video. Hi, I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me, and welcome to the channel. While you're here, don't forget to drop down below, like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff that makes me and YouTube happy, and let's hop right into the video. So yeah, Charizard didn't get any of its ancestral forms with paradox type of mentality. So I thought first and foremost, let's go into that. Starting off with our past paradox form of Charizard, I had to look at some of the design elements that make Charizard. Part of it is that it's a flying fire type, but we get to change some things when looking at it as a past paradox. Really cool and really interesting dynamic that allows us to bring in that dragon typing that it kind of always should have been. But back in Generation 1, dragon type was so overpowered because the fairy type didn't exist yet, that to give a starter dragon type energy would really throw off the entire groove of the game. You'd have everyone picking Charizard, and while I know that my hatred for fire types is well documented across all of the videos made within the last year, I want to talk about bringing in that new dragon typing, making this a fire dragon type to kind of offset some of that weirdness that we already have with Charizard. Very popular Pokemon, but the dynamics surrounding him is off-putting, to say the least. So I wanted to go with a classical dragon type of look, and while I know that honestly Charizard is focused more around kind of our Western view of dragons, I wanted to go for an Eastern type of look with that long and lithe body, giving it these wings that kind of jut out on either end and just making it look like your classic as thought dragon. Also throwing in those paradox type of features like the stripes to give it more of a feral type of look, and obviously trying to follow some of the patterns that we see with other past paradox Pokemon. So I played around with the design a little bit, mostly kind of solidifying myself into that lithe type of body, and luckily that was enough to differentiate the design. Another big point of Charizard is that the fire on its tail is kind of its life force. If that fire goes out, Charizard is dead. It's dead. So I decided, why don't we bring in that liveliness, bring in that vibrancy, and create this big tail that's almost engulfed in flame. Like this past paradox form was more so controlled by that fiery life force than any other form that we've seen so far. So I played with that, making almost this lion type of tail, whereas dragons are meant to be amalgamations of multiple different animals. It kind of fits. And playing up the structure of this Charizard's head to more so mimic a Charizard Mega X, I think it really works. We're bringing in a lot of different additives here from different versions of Charizard that already exist, and luckily we have so many to choose from, so it was able to easily form itself into something that I felt worked for the design and made it feel that little bit more feral, made it feel like it was a past paradox over anything else. It was a ton of fun, and while, like I said, Charizard is not one of my favorite Pokemon, I feel like he's really overplayed, this design really gave me a love back for that Pokemon, made me feel like Charizard is viable outside of just his cool factor. So here is our past paradox Charizard. I can't say it enough how much that I dig this design. I think it's really cool, changing up the shape from that round body style into this lithe one, as well as bringing the wings in a little bit more so that they're less these huge, overarching, massive wings into these more slender ones, more so to fit the body, but also bringing in kind of that not quite evolved to the point of Charizard yet type of feel. But we can't do past paradox Charizard without talking about future paradox Charizard. I'm sorry, it's gonna happen. past Paradoxes we all can agree were super cool, but future Paradox forms were a little lackluster. They were a design that a lot of us really took some issue with, hey, this Pokemon is just a robot, whereas the past Paradox forms were cavemen, or dinosaurs, or these more feral and ancestral forms. The future Paradoxes were just, hey, what if it metal? So playing up that idea a little bit more was difficult. I looked at Iron Thorns as a big example for that draconic type of shape and body, as well as its use of color. I wanted to bring in more silver, and I played up that idea throughout the design, throughout the coloring process. You'll see me kind of go in swapping out colors a lot for this design, and it's mainly because I wanted to bring in just a little bit more energy. If we're gonna go robot, then let's go robot. But as I continued to look and as I continued to research what it takes to make a future Paradox Pokemon, I realized that I was kind of breaking the rules of that standard. So I went in, kind of just made it orange with these black rubbery type of material, which I actually really love. It's one of my favorite design elements of the future Paradox, is this rubbery black type of area. So I brought that in a lot. A bigger point of contention was what to do with the tail, because when we look at these future Paradoxes, a lot of them don't have like a flowing energy type of look. Many of them are solid, hard. So I went in with the tail and instead made it this lantern type of shape, which still also mimicked that fire type of feel. Very interesting, very fun to play with, but also very much a challenge. The other big thing was it felt like no matter what position I put this Pokemon in, I was doing one of two things: mimicking a position that already existed within a different form of Charizard, or blocking something that I really wanted to be seen. For example, the wings, if not positioned a certain way, would fully block the tail, or the tail would fully block the wings and make them look smaller. So I played around a little bit, came up with a structure that I think kind of works, and also got to bring in a little bit more of the idea of future Paradox. The idea is that they're toys, or they're useful tools or items that have been adapted to look like Pokemon. So here I thought about a heater, like a space heater, like the thing that's sitting right next to me right now. I looked at that idea and thought, what if we expand Charizard's face to feel more like a furnace, bringing in those vents throughout the rest of the body to give a little bit of symmetry top to bottom, while still able to utilize the shapes that were fun to play with in the first place. It was interesting, it was fun, it was complex. Working with a Pokemon that's not one of my favorites, but is a huge fan favorite, on top of a gimmick that a lot of people really didn't enjoy, it was a hodgepodge. It was a Mod Podge. It was a nightmare, if I can say that. Just a big, fat nightmare of bringing everything that I don't like into play. Only thing missing was making it a horse. For those of you who haven't been on our Wednesday lives, I talked for days at this point about my uncertainty and uncomfortability with the concept of horses, but that's neither here nor there. If you want to see those lives, I do them every Wednesday. That's where you can drop commissions, and I do those on the live stream. They're a ton of fun. Here's some stuff that you actually missed on the last live stream. There's a shipment of Hatsune Miku body pillows coming through this week across the old Rio Grande. What we're gonna do is we gotta get to those Hatsune Miku body pillows, and we'll be rich, boys. But back to Future Paradox Charizard, I really love the texture, that spacey type of vibe that you get from Future Paradox Pokemon. I just wish that it was utilized in more creative ways. So for here, I turned the wings into the same spectral space energy, the tail, utilized that throughout different parts of the body as well to give that space heater type of vibe that allows this Pokemon to feel like it should or would exist in this Future Paradox form. And so, here it is. Again, I took a lot of inspiration from Pokemon like Iron Thorns in making this work, and wanted to really throw Charizard on top of that. While I'm not a huge fan of Future Paradox Pokemon, I feel like this really gets the point across of what they're meant to capture, and playing with the new types of highlights that they utilize for those metal exoskeletons was fun. I got to play with lighting in ways that I don't normally do, so it kind of worked out. A fun practice and a fun exercise in making that work in a way that that hopefully works. Again, on top of a Pokemon and a design and a gimmick that I'm not 100% on board with. But we can't stop talking about Charizard forms there. If we did, it'd be a really short video. So instead, what we're gonna do is focus on a design that I've heard so many creators say, we had better not get this. So going on that same thought process, if I design something that looks okay and goes pretty widespread, that means that we won't get it in a Pokemon game. We've seen the same thing happen with the Eevee type of mentality, with that whole premise of, hey, there was a flying type Eevee invented by Game Freak, but it looked a little too similar to an already existing Fakemon, so they cut it. So if you really don't want another Mega Charizard Z in this case, share this video, let people know. That way Game Freak can see and say, oh, we have no other choice but to cut Charizard from the game. So that's my little spiel, that's my little cut, because we're gonna be looking at Mega Charizard Z. For Mega Charizard Z, I really had to focus on what makes Mega Charizard X and Charizard Y feel different from Charizard. I played with this design for a lot longer than I probably needed to, but I wanted to make sure that we capture a lot of the energy of the already existing Megas while incorporating new structure to them. I've seen a lot of fan art of Mega Charizard Z where it turns green, and while that does seem interesting and it is something that I played with, it's not necessarily what I wanted to go for this form. I get it. Z is for Zygarde, and Zygarde is green, so therefore Mega Charizard Z should be green as well. I disagree. I think that it should still look like Charizard, but having the ability to change up the color a little bit was something introduced with Mega Charizard X, where it suddenly becomes black and blue. So I was able to change the color, but I knew what I wanted to do as well, and that was not draft too far away from the actual Charizard. I actually talked with a couple other creators on the differences between Gigantamax and Megas recently on a collaboration that I did, so it was something fresh in my mind. How to make that work, how to make that structure and form kind of make sense for this design, and it felt like the Mega form is an evolution of points of the Pokemon, whereas a Gigantamax form, which we already have with Charizard, is an expansion of a specific idea with the design. So here, I wanted to look at several different aspects of Charizard and kind of evolve those a little bit further. Bigger issue was I didn't know what type to make this. We already have a flying fire type with Charizard Y, and we have a dragon fire type with Charizard X. So Charizard Z is kind of up to you. Let me know down in the comments what typing you think Mega Charizard Z would have. I kind of went with the mentality of it being a flying dragon type, but I also didn't want to remove the fire type because that felt like we're breaking the rules of it being a starter final form. But then again, Charizard's never been one to follow those rules anyway, so let me know down in the comments. Super interested in what you have to say. While you're down there, don't forget to check out our Discord as well. We're getting eerily close to 2,000 members, and I'm curious who that's gonna be. But playing with the design, I wanted to incorporate a couple different aspects in that we haven't seen before. That's kind of the point of the whole redesign, right? Is looking at aspects that do exist, things that we do want to bring in from the previous iterations, and then adding on new aspects to it as well. While I decided to get rid of the green texture, I decided to keep that green fire. I felt like it really emphasized that Z energy without fully blowing us into the green dragon type of feel. You dig? It also was an introduction because Charizard X was so blue and black, I felt like it was okay to bring in that new color scheme. Plus, I just really liked that yellow and green, and after playing with it a little bit, I decided I didn't want to move away from it. So that's kind of what stuck and stayed around from the initial concept. I also wanted to bring in a little bit more of that draconic energy and some stuff that we do see in Pokemon like Zygarde, have a little hint drawing to that without being entirely just what if Zygarde was Charizard. That might be a different video. So I brought in this texture of these scales, these hexagonal type of shapes, to allow for this breakup and texturization of the entire flow of the design, and it's something that I really like. I've been doing this in drawings a little bit more recently, is adding on this secondary texture, and it's a lot of fun and gives a certain depth to the Pokemon that wasn't there initially. So I wanted to throw it on here, and I felt like it was really cool. I played with the colors a little bit more before we got to the final render, and yeah, here it is. This is Mega Charizard Z. I really dig that gradient that I was able to throw on. It makes it feel like it could potentially be a fairy type. So utilizing Charizard as a base, throwing on some elements from Charizard Y, and Charizard X kind of giving me permission to go a little bit crazier and gone wild with the colors, gave me something that I really enjoy, and even throwing on that gradient of color makes it feel like this could potentially be a psychic or fairy type, but that's ultimately going to be left up to you guys down in the comments. I really dig this design, especially one for a Pokemon that I wasn't 100% on at the beginning, because let's be honest, Charizard has a gimmick problem. It's something that a lot of us fear, that every time that a new gimmick comes out, we're going to see Charizard suddenly get a new form, taking the spot that could have gone to another Pokemon that hasn't had any spotlight in a while. But all that said, what do you guys think? Do you think Charizard should just kind of become the mascot of these new gimmicks, or do you think it's enough? We've had enough Charizard. You know where I stand, but I am more than happy to talk to you guys about that whole thing in the Discord, which is linked down below, or here in the comments. All that said, it sounds like you know where to find me, and I'll catch you in the next one. But before we go, I want to give a big shout out to all the supporters who help make these videos possible. You can become a supporter by becoming a YouTube member for just $3 a month, or by supporting me over at the Patreon. Some of our higher tier members over at the Patreon are going to be Dan Bush, Styx TV, Soren Frost, Caitlin Cat, Siren Shadows, Justin Grenier, Jeremy Sunday, Drake Null, Yuja Sakaki, Sky, Alandriel, Kobo4231, Chompy Kachan, and our newest member over at that Patreon is going to be Dan Hassel. Thank you, Dan, and thank you to all the other Patreon supporters. I also want to give a shout out to all of our YouTube members, those being Lynxia, RJ, Zed Ravenmore, Siren Shadows, Somni Stars, Kaylin Cat, and of course, Crimbo McSwizzle. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel, supporting me in this weird endeavor where I draw Pokemon on the internet, and I will catch you in the next one. Feels so exciting.